Edu just been named sporting director and already having a heart attack watching Bukayo Saka's price go up, up, up. This is the ArsenalVision Post-Match Podcast. My name is Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. I don't know. Is it the post-match? It's not. What is it? This is the ArsenalVision during the World Cup. Let's talk about Arsenal podcast. There will be a World Cup daily today out, just probably a few short hours from the time you listen to this. There will be a World Cup daily out, as the name suggests, daily with Lewis and Phil. Probably myself most of the time. Maybe Clive or Paul or Tim will be on those as well. Maybe we'll get Scott on them. But they're there to keep you going through the World Cup. Today is about Arsenal on this podcast. And here to talk Arsenal with me is Paul. You can find him on Twitter at Pause My Pants. Hello, Pause.
Woohoo!
And Clive, you can find him on Twitter at ClivePFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello, hello.
Really, really weird. I find myself like, it almost feels like summer, not outside, where if I step out there, I turn into an icicle immediately. But in the sense that like the Arsenal stuff, all of a sudden I feel like it's a million years ago. It feels like we played Wolves between 6 and 7 months ago. It feels like the season is distant memory. It's just a very bizarre thing we're going through. But we did get to watch an Arsenal player today. I should mention we're recording this as Senegal and Netherlands are tied 0-0 in the second half. So the game that we saw earlier was England play Bukayo Saka making his World Cup debut and scoring 2 goals. And poor Edu, now sporting director, having to go to Stan Kroenke and say, remember the contract we're going to put in front of him? You're going to need to add some zeros to that. So Clive, all kidding aside, wonderful moment for Bukayo, makes his World Cup debut, gets 2 goals. Iran's defense was shocking, but that's beside the point. It's just it's a chance for the world to see and celebrate a player that we love. And I think if this gives him a little bit more of that flair and confidence in front of goal, it can only help because we know we're going to need more goals when the season comes back. What are your thoughts on Bukayo Saka, star boy, getting a brace for England?
Yeah, very nice, wasn't it? It was like I tweeted out, I felt like a proud dad watching our boy going to do his thing. And obviously he's had his redemption day, really. And first of many, as we know that this is just the beginning of his career. And I look at international football, the level's not as high, but the pressure is times 10, because the whole nation, the whole world is watching. And so everything you do has more pressure around it. Hence the execution means a bit more, whether you execute, whether you don't. There's just a few more eyes on you. So, yeah, there may be a couple of window cleaners in that Iran team, but that's maybe being disrespectful. But you still got to do it, right? And they did it when everyone was watching at the right time. And so, yeah, a very, very good day for all Arsenal watching people that have that glow running through them right now. Particularly, there was not a lot, but a bit of will he start, will he play type vibe going on before the game. Well, he sort of put that to bed, hasn't he, really?
Taken off at 70 minutes wrapped in cotton wool, one of the more important players for England, I'd suggest. And Paul, look, my selfish preference is Bukayo Saka having his feet up for the next few weeks and coming back to us rested and ready. But I guess the second best thing you could ask for is a day like this, a pretty easy day where Bukayo gets a couple of goals and just feels himself and feels his stature growing. Because when we come back to the season, we can't look at the title race as plucky underdogs trying to do our best. At some point, we're going to have to take on the role of we belong here and we're good enough. And one way you can feel that way is going and impressing the world with your skill and your quality and your goals. And so setting aside the fact that he's playing and that means exertion, what do you think the benefits might be of our young players, whether it's Saliba or Martinelli or certainly Bukayo Saka, going out there and really announcing themselves to the world and how that could influence how they come back to us?
Yeah, look, I often find myself out of step with Arsenaldom in that
doesn't show.
Players want to play. Athletes got to athlete. Footballers got to football. As long as they don't totally overload him, there's a spectrum of outcomes in terms of how much he's played. It sounds like there'll be some rotation. The messaging for this was Saka starts for this one, Foden starts for the next. I mean, these guys, depending on how far they go and how much they played, may come back in better shape, fitter, more tuned in. We just, it's one of those, you don't know. You can't say universally it's great if he plays every game or he doesn't play, or the problem is that it's a bit random. It's not going to be managed by Arsenal. It's going to be managed by England and their needs. But hopefully Martinelli, Martinelli's not going to start every game, that's for sure. I guess
he
he's
may not play at all. Who knows?
Yeah.
Although if his training videos are any indication, apparently he's been the star of Brazil training. I don't know what that's worth.
Yeah. But I guess he's competing to some degree against Neymar. So he could be Pele. Well, that wouldn't help him, actually. No, it might, actually. That might be the one thing that would help him. He could be Pele, and he might get in ahead of Neymar occasionally. And Jesus, most Brazilian supporters that I know in real life don't want him to play at all. So who knows? Who knows whether he'll start? I think there's a misunderstanding as to his value to the team. And then you look at all the players who are getting a little vacation right now. I mean, it's an interesting experiment. We don't know. I think we've got to kind of give a little trust over to these things and just hope that the gods are kind to us, because we don't know is like, I don't know if anybody knows.
No, that's a fair point. Well, Clive, one of the things we know is that the World Cup is a place for players to announce themselves, not just to the world, but to other clubs that may be interested in them. It seems like Bukayo Saka has struck up a friendship with Jude Bellingham, and his talent stands out. I don't know what to tell you. I look at that player and I think, you're how old? Yeah. So
why would you do this to Clive?
Well, what I want to know from Clive is, do we get Bellingham in January, or are we going to have to wait till June?
Yeah, the one that got away, right? So there are rumors that
he hasn't gotten away yet. He hasn't gotten away.
Well, everyone. He's been coming for a while. Like, there's no secrets here. Everyone wanted him at 14, 15, 16. Birmingham
We've been
played
seeing
him.
Other people for a little while, Clive. That's all. We've just been seeing other people.
And there was rumors that Edu had him on file, but wasn't too sure. I don't like those rumors. I shouldn't even said that. But I feel there's a missed opportunity there somewhere, because I don't like.
I don't edit these podcasts, right, Clive? Just so we're clear, that's going out.
I don't like the fact, and I mean this. I think there are some players that go abroad because they want to, educate themselves, and I shouldn't be against that. But there are some players that would play anyway if they were here, and every single player in that squad is in the Premier League apart from one. And I do feel that I wish he had stayed here, and if one of our rivals, because now 140 million quid is going to go out of the English game. And I don't think, for a couple of years at Dortmund, I think he'd have got that experience in the UK. I think that's a shame. That's me with my football hat on. Forget Arsenal. That money leaves our shores, and could be used so much more in different ways, right? So, but hey, it is what it is. That's market forces. He's protected his career. He comes back a bona fide world-class star, and he can pick his club. I'm afraid he might pick Man City. And if he picks Man City, we're all in a bit of trouble. He's just a storming player that bestrides the pitch. At times in that game, Declan Rice was thinking, can I have a touch? Do you know what I mean? Because literally he was just all over the pitch. And it's great, isn't it? 19 years of age. What were you doing at 19?
Crazy.
What were you doing at 19?
I mean,
just think about that for a second.
I was on the outside of the U.S. World Cup team. I couldn't get in. To be fair, at that point in time, I was probably not far off the level. The interesting, he says, alienating our U.S. listeners. I am one with that zeitgeist. So the interesting thing, though, is the problem with the Jude Bellingham is Manchester City can make a very compelling pitch to him, Paul, whereas Arsenal can't, because he's going to spend at least 3 or 4 seasons behind Granit Xhaka, if not 5. So, I just don't see how we can make a pitch for him. What is your take on the impact budget-wise of players having a good World Cup? It's funny, if you remember, I went back last summer and I was listening to this. I said, if I'm Bukayo's agent, there's no way I'd let him sign now. Even if he wants to stay, there's no way, because the amount of leverage you have in the negotiation after he starts in a World Cup, after he maybe performs well in a World Cup, after he plays well one more season for Arsenal, and after he gets closer to 1 season left on his deal, it's just, as an agent, there's no way I'd let him sign. And now we are in an interesting situation. I'm curious what you think happens to the negotiation if Bukayo goes out and scores 5 World Cup goals, and England aren't going to go out in the group stage. I think that's pretty clear. Whatever the run they make or don't make, what does this do to our efforts to re-sign him? Because I am convinced he's staying. I'm convinced. but the number obviously isn't agreed upon yet, or the contract would be signed. So what does this do to this negotiation?
So
People are
yes,
screaming whiskers at their podcast listening devices right now. Shut up, whiskers!
Look,
But yeah, go ahead.
there's two schools of thought. There's yours, right, and then there's mine, which is I like to sleep at night. So my feeling is, here's my theory: it's basically already done. It's about timing now. Now, of course, it might not be done, but there's every chance. Like the mood music's so good. I think they've worked it out. It's just like,
you think the numbers agreed though? Because if numbers agreed, the contract would be signed. I feel like,
No.
Yeah,
well,
I
it
think
might
so.
actually be. Yeah, it might actually be signed. It doesn't mean they've shared it with us. Like Arteta went to the US in January last year, and they announced his contract in April or whatever, right?
Yeah.
They agreed it in January. The timing of Edu's announcement with this thing, I mean, things are very much in control at the moment, ticking along. Like Martinelli's thing might have been a little bit of a Freudian slip. Give me the pen and I'll sign it, right? He may just feel it's all like bloody done. And so I'm not saying
we have going for us on the other side of the ledger, Paul, is we're a club competing for titles now, right? We're a club that's going to be in the Champions League next season. So Bukayo's stature is growing, but our stature is growing. Why would you not want to be with us, right? So I guess both sides have strengthened their hand, so to speak, right? Through the performance of the club. Yeah.
It's just a good feeling all around. And these guys, like they have agents. There's a time for the agent. The player steps away and blah, blah. There's a time for the player to step back in and say, look, we're close enough. I don't really give a shit at this point about 3 percentage points either way. I'm loving life at the football club. I'm 21, not 27 or 29. I don't give a crap. I've got.
Can I just say one thing about that?
And I'm not saying they don't care. Now, remember the bit I said, the last 2 or 3%, not the last 20, 30. Like players care about money in terms of, but like if they ain't nearly done by now, I'll be shocked.
Yeah, and the only thing I would say is I always try to be careful about remembering, like, who was I? I was just talking to someone about this, about how, so I was out with a friend, and this friend was very, very close to a longtime professional footballer in the Premier League. And the professional footballer would always say to him, like, players aren't fans. Players that see this as a job. They have a short career. And no matter how much they love the club they're at, players do still see it as their job, as their earning, as their short window, and they are going to prioritize earning as they should. This is just insight he gave me, right or wrong.
I 100% agree with that. But there's a difference between a player at a club who's 27. I don't know. James Milner when he's at, some other club.
No, I agree with you, yeah.
And Bukayo Saka, golden boy of his generation at Arsenal, like he's the face and future of the it could not be any better for him. He doesn't care about 2 or 3%. I'm not saying he doesn't care about money or getting all his money. He's going to want to look around the league at Foden and this and that. No, he's got his, because he needs to stand in the England dressing room with these guys, and it's about status and stuff. But at some point, you don't care about the 2 or 3%.
I agree with you. And yeah, I want to be clear. Like, I'm not trying to create an argument because I think he's staying. I think it may be agreed already. I just think that it's always important to center in these conversations the fact that these players do have short careers, they have to maximize their earnings, and that, like, you made a point that I think is interesting.
When he's 26. Don't get me wrong. It's not like,
when
it couldn't happen because it's Arsenal. Yeah, or even your middle, like he's going to look around when he's 25 and 26 and say, what is the best thing for my career? Screw the rest of you.
And this is the point, right? If you're offered 200, do you not sign because you wanted 210? I mean, we know Ashley Cole drove his car off the road over a small amount. Like, so we've seen that happen before. But yeah, by and large, I agree. I think it's done. Like, well, Clive, the man who is in charge of this, the man who is going to be overseeing this discussion is Edu. And Edu is now Arsenal's first ever sporting director. And I think he deserves credit for the work he's done. I have been critical of Edu. I have to admit, this is just, let's unburden ourselves just for a second. I still find myself looking at Edu and being like, is he the guy? which is crazy. Look at the team he's built. Look at the squad he's built. And I find myself still asking questions. And I guess that's the hard thing with a sporting director. You don't really know, do you, ever? Like, you know, they always talked about Zorc at Dortmund. You know, you get an Aubameyang or you get a Dembele and you're a genius. You get it wrong and you're an idiot. Like this is hard stuff and it's hard to be proven right. But Edu has been made sporting director. And I think the more interesting aspect of this conversation, Clive, is what, if anything, this changes about his role, about his relationship to Arteta, and about how the club may be structured going forward. Because I do think that there's scope for change to occur now with him being made sporting director.
Yeah, so everyone else's sporting director or technical director looks better than ours. That's what we were feeling a few years ago. We sat on this podcast, all of us, I think, speaking about we need a Ralph Rangnick in our club. Remember that? And when we were desperately
not as coach, to be fair.
No, we didn't say as coach, no. But you know, we were reaching, we were thinking about how we could improve our structure, and we were suggesting ideas, right? And who's the guy at Seville? I've forgotten his name now.
Monchi.
Thank you, Paul. Completely left my brain. And all those people look really sexy, right? So and Edu came in, and much like when Arteta came in, when Edu came in, the key thing is for me is to listen to them and learn. Arteta's first interview, if you replay it to yourselves now, is everything he said is almost here, right? And one of Edu's first interviews, he was talking about building a team. And this is when I started to really switch on to him a little bit differently. And he spoke about physicality. And when he sat there and he literally slapped his thighs and said, when I played in the team, we had physicality. And you know my thoughts around the physical and technical balance of a team. So I was really excited by that, because in England, you have to be able to win your duels, he says, quoting a popular phrase. And so and he has built a team right now with the club, no doubt, and the recruitment team and Arteta, which has a physical and technical balance, which, as we sit here today, as friends have been talking about football for about 4 or 5 years, we can barely find fault with that balance. And we are literally nitpicking it and looking to add layers to that 14, 15 that we have, just to keep us, you know, asleep at night in case we get any injuries. That's literally where we are. And the physical and technical and the speed and the carrying, the balance is wonderful, right? And balance is everything, you know, in a squad. And so the actual role change for me, we had a little scouting pod last week, didn't we? And we spoke about this. And the first thing I thought, when you have a player a person in the club that's had a promotion, that creates room for another layer, right? And so given the expansion of his responsibilities, for me, that leaves an obvious room for somebody else to come into that technical team, shall we say. Not sure the profile of that person. I think that person will be driven more towards transfers, maybe data. I don't know, Elliot. But somebody else in that group to add expertise into that we don't particularly have at this moment in time, maybe with a slightly more European focus, given Edu's got a very strong South American focus. His European experience was very low before he came into Arsenal. And now he's obviously broadened that and he's creating contacts, but a few more contacts in Europe wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, right? And so you create more strength. So you broaden his role. He's a senior person in the club on a permanent contract. It's not like a player's contract. So you've promoted him, like we get promoted in our jobs, and that means somebody else.
Speak for yourself.
And the way comms normally works, with my sort of corporate background, the way comms work, you get the highest announcement first, and it cascades down. And so, if all my guesswork is coming to fruition, the next announcement, I think, will be coming quite soon. And I think there are a number of announcements coming quite soon. And I'm not where you are on contracts. I'm slightly okay. You're a natural worrier, and that's your job, and you do it beautifully.
I'm not worried, to be clear.
Yeah, but I do think there'll be a number of contract announcements coming as well, and I think they're strategically placed to make sure that we refocus and mentally bring everyone back on board post the World Cup. That's what I would do if I was involved in communications at Arsenal. I'd make sure that these things were done, but you do not waste an announcement. You make sure it arrives at the right time to have maximum impact. And that's what I would do. So watch this space here. I think we are building our club still. There's room for one more. We felt this for a while. And it was so interesting to see who that individual is. If it's somebody high profile, low profile, someone known to the Arsenal community in some way. It'd be so interesting if we are correct with our hunches, really, Elliot.
Yeah, and I don't want to fully repeat myself from the scouting video we did. By the way, over on Patreon, we did a scouting video for 2 players, Jesper Lidstrom and Mudryk. Really, really interesting video. And as always, those show me things I'm not expecting to see, lead me to conclusions I'm not expecting to draw. And we've gotten a lot of interesting feedback from that. So if you're interested, that's on the Patreon side of things. And we'll have midfielders scouted for you the back half of this week. So yeah, if you want to do that, great. If not, by the way, happy to have you here. You have a pod every day. So Paul, I guess first of all, I think Edu, how can you argue with this? Like he's been brilliant, right? I mean, I have questions about some of the things we did when he first arrived. He had to inherit some of the Raul stuff. Hard to know how much, if any of it, he was involved with. But since then, the moves we made have worked out. And since all this sporting director stuff is pretty hard to assess out in the open daylight because you don't know much of what's happening, you just have to look at the squad that's built and say, job done. And there's still job to do, but I mean, so far, so good. What I think it does for us, Paul, is it provides the opportunity for there to be a layer between another position beneath Edu, but alongside Mikel. And this is, now I'm going to go into the land of just guessing at shit, okay? My usual realm. Edu strikes me as someone who can help us develop the Brazilian relationship, obviously, for obvious reasons, who can get the relationships done, who wants to go represent the club as the face of its sporting ambition to other clubs, to other agents, to other places. Is he the guy that wants to grind tape, as they usually say, that used to say, that wants to build the list of all of our targets, that wants to go with Arteta into a dark room and do scouting videos like Clive and I do, right, to try to identify who's going to be the next left 8 after Saka? Should Edu be that guy? So I think, once upon a time we had a Sven Mislintat. Some people hated him. Some people think he was a magician. 6 and 1, half dozen the other. What I'm saying is there a position, a head of recruitment type position, who reports up to Edu, but who is a little more tactical and a little more engaged with the scouts and the video scouts and the recruiting team on a day-to-day basis and working with Arteta on a day-to-day basis so that Edu can keep his head above the parapet a little bit? Do you think that position might now become a role that the club can add?
Yeah, look, my first reaction to it was maybe wrong, but my first reaction was, I don't know that it signifies a huge change in his responsibilities or levels or whatever. I think it's largely a recognition that he's done a great job. It's time for increased status, which he will want, increased reward, and just a general recognition that the last 2 major windows have been a real success and that he's turned things around. We've talked about how good is he, or we thought he might be okay, then we thought he might suck, now we think he's a genius. What's it all mean? We talked about Monchi, we talk about Rangnick. A lot of it is context, even for Edu within the one club. Like Monchi at Roma, questions about, is he a genius, is he not? Rangnick, right? Turns out,
yeah.
When we talked about whether we wanted Rangnick, what we really wanted was Manchester United to have Rangnick. He's obviously a smart, talented guy in the right context at the right time. And I think that's very much the case with Edu. As the context around him changed, it brought out the best in him. I kind of feel, though, you're onto something. There is a point in a guy's tenure. He's obviously been very hands-on. I mean, we got rid of a whole bunch of people. We got rid of how we did scouting, we moved to a bigger emphasis, by all accounts, on analytics, analysis, video. We got rid of our scouting team. We had a story that we would use far more video and analytics, but in South America, and obviously the Brazil market, we would lean more heavily on scouts, which was an interesting hybrid model. It'd be very interesting to find out if that's what they're really doing at this point. But clearly, we got rid of a whole bunch of people, and he would have needed to have stepped in and been in the trenches with his much smaller team. And a small team that you believe in, you trust, and can move quickly can achieve what a large team kind of can't, or does worse, or you don't know what the problems are, where they're coming from. But there then comes a time where there's only so much, like, you don't want your generals in the trenches for too long. They need to kind of get more and more perspective, be more, go from being short term to medium term, which he has been, to long term. He's got a 5-year plan, I think he laid out. He talked about how last year was about Europa League. Unfortunately, it turned out it was about Europa League, even though it looked like we could almost get to Champions League. This year looks like was supposed to be about Champions League, and it looks like we're well on track. And all the time he's getting his head up higher. So I think there is the scope to bring in some kind of technical director under a director of football, so that Edu kind of takes a little bit more and more and more. Now that everything's established, he's comfortable that it's working right. He knows how it works. He knows what his people are doing. The trust is there. You can begin to trust your people, step back and let them do the job now that it's been established, what the job's roles are, processes, how it links to the other departments. And he can focus a little bit more on how it all comes together, the synthesis within the organization. And things are always changing. Clive will always tell us, right? You never arrive. So he may have absolutely nailed how we've done. I don't know. Maybe we got lucky. But he might have actually absolutely nailed how we do football up to November 2022. But other clubs are doing different things.
Yeah, and I mean, whatever the next steps are in building out the club.
Yeah.
We always like our own ideas. I do think that there's scope for another position there, right? That works more regularly with Arteta on a day-to-day sort of tactical level of what the needs are and who the targets are, and reviewing with Arteta. Here's the list of 5 we like. You have thoughts on this? And I don't know that should be Edu. But one thing I think is interesting, Clive, Edu has been a part of building this winner. The love for Mikel Arteta is overflowing at the moment, and rightfully so. Somehow it still feels muted for Edu. And I think it's so interesting. We are a club rising back to prominence, competing for a title, being guided by 2 former Arsenal players. What a wonderful thing. And yet, Arteta getting all the love he rightly deserves. Edu, it feels like it's been a little more muted. No, by the way, Cody Gakpo has just headed the Netherlands in front at the 85th minute. A nice header. I think it's onside. It's a good goal. Cody Gakpo, a player that we did a scouting video for and liked very much. Although didn't impress tremendously in our games against PSV. Anyway, I digress. Clive, it's weird to me that it's sort of muted, because Edu's an invincible. Edu's a former player. Edu's helped us build this team too. And I don't think he's just receiving full, effusive, unqualified adoration. Now, look, should anyone get that? Should you just throw off all your mental faculties and love everybody all the time? I mean, you do it how you want to. But do you have a thought on maybe why we're not seeing more sort of effusive, unqualified love for Edu, who also is a former player, former Invincible, and very much part of this group that we've built that's doing what it's doing?
I think we're forgetting Mertesacker as well, by the way, who's head of the academy.
Of course. Well, who could forget him?
And
Stands out in the crowd.
And so, yeah, I think it comes down to knowledge of that person. Do we have? We only have. I mean, Tim would probably have the most knowledge of Edu in an executive role. So as a player, I've got full, clear memories of him as a player. A very key member of that team when we had a midfielder out, which we did on a lot of occasions due to our red card history. Edu came in and he can handle himself and move that ball. A very good player. Probably similar to, for the younger listener, very, very similar to Granit Xhaka in a number of ways, the way he moved, the ball. And so, but that's how we remember him. We don't remember him as an executive in Brazil. And so when he came in, there's a level of, okay, what are you bringing to the show? You know, and so a little bit of suspicion there. But as over time, you judge people by their actions, don't you? Because some of the earlier actions under Raul we questioned, but since that situation has changed, he's almost been faultless. Literally faultless. What's happening, and you don't get the feeling that we're feeling right now without full alignment on and off the pitch, right? And he's a big part of that. One thing Tim did say to us very quickly, that he partners well with people. I think he partnered well with the Brazilian manager. They become a partnership when he took the role.
Tite, yeah.
Yeah, he wanted Edu with him. And so I took that little nugget from Tim and thought, it'd be interesting to see if Edu partners with Arteta in the same way. And it seems as though they have done. And there's a real close link there. And it's not something just manufactured. It seems to be real and genuine. If you listen to Arteta, then there's no hesitation in his body language when he's talking about Edu. They're mates, right? They are running the show. I often feel, just with my hat, my corporate hat on, when I see two people working this well together, I think succession planning, I think key man dependency. So I immediately think we got to make sure that we're not left naked there. Do you know what I mean? That's just what you got to do. If anything was to happen, you got to make sure there are people in the building that can take up the reins, right? So that's just been my thing about the extra person coming in, whoever that person is. I've got no idea. I don't care about the job role. The role will sort itself out. Full trust. Edu's role, fine. He's more or less doing it now anyway. So now it's been solidified, and Arteta's role is clear to us all. So how we had expertise, I think, is the most important thing. So for me, I'm a fan of Edu. I like how he's approached the football. But I can say that now with a lot more certainty than I did when he first arrived, because I didn't know. So I've learned and watched and listened, and I'm a huge fan now.
I genuinely wonder how differently he might be perceived by the Arsenal fan base if he was not on Instagram barbecuing. What has that done to his reputation with Arsenal fans? Paul, you want to add on, Edu?
Yeah, it's a tough one to evaluate, because for a director of football, I don't know, maybe we actually really, really like him and he's very highly rated, because those are normally kind of in the background. Like when you contrast him to Arteta, sure, but he's a manager on the sidelines, right? There are other famous directors of football, but they're normally famous because the team has done huge things, and afterwards people say, well, how did they do that? And, your legend is built after the fact. And Edu's very, very well regarded, I think, given that he's kind of a backroom, backstaff guy from a footballing perspective, and things are building really well, and we're top of and all that good stuff. But he was quite well liked this summer. And what did we do? We didn't quite make Champions League. So I think relatively we like him. You know what I mean? Compared to directors of football at other clubs, I think Edu's held in very warm regard at this point.
Clive?
Yeah, I just want to say that one of the reasons why we respect both Edu and Arteta is they were the first ones to tell us we had problems. They told us we had a way to go. They told us there was a disconnect.
I was one of the first to say we had problems. I feel like I could have done that job. Pay me to tell you we have problems.
You know what I mean? But people in the club were sort of saying, trying to cover our cracks with Willians and things like that, right? And nice buys and big wages and big contracts. But these were two guys who said, nah, we're nowhere near it. We got work to do. We got a clean house. And they made some very unpopular decisions that did not put themselves first, but put the club first. It's so much easier just to keep people in the building that the fans like. But not only did they not keep people in the building that the fans liked or debated about, they paid them to go. That's high risk strategy. That is like, I'm putting myself on the fire here. This has to work. So when you see someone prepared to do that, then I'm prepared to give them a break, right? And wait and be patient, because I'll long for cleaning this house up, with the type of people that are motivated to be here for the right reason, which is for the club. And I think we all feel that now, and it's really and he's a big flag bearer of that. So fair play to him, mate. You come into Europe, no rep, and has done this to the point now where other teams want to get him. Football's a village. People are talking about him inside the village, and his reputation's obviously grown.
Yeah, and they've made mistakes. I mean, they cleaned up some of their own mistakes. We know what those are. But that also takes something, right? Not to hold on to your mistakes, to see them for what they are, to stand up to the board, to Josh Kroenke and say, we fucked up. Now we got to pay this guy to go. So be it.
That's important. And I'm going to say something that people are going to hate, but we should at least be fair. I don't think this works then if you don't give KSE just a tiny bit of credit. I know people don't want to hear it, but the credit is when they come to you and say, hey, we just signed Aubameyang to this monster deal. Now we just want to make him leave and pay him to go away. We just signed this guy, Willian. We want to pay him to go away so that we can go sign new players. This guy, Pepe, we paid $72 million. We need him to go away. We need to sign new players. KSE could have looked at it and said, you made this mess. These are the players you bought. You got to make it work with them. I'm not funding, these guys to go play for other clubs and then bring in new ones. And again, they would have been wrong if they had said that. I'm not trying to paint them as heroes for what they did, but they did back the direction of these two men, Arteta and Edu, and they're reaping some reward from that. And please do not mistake this for me just trying to do a puff piece on KSE, but like the fact of the matter is a lot of mistakes were made, granted under the Raul era. I'm not saying it was under the Edu era. And KSE was willing to help finance the move out of that and do it during a period around COVID and whatnot, where revenues were not what they should have been, where we weren't in Europe, where we didn't have stadium receipts. So, and I know, again, people are going to point out a lot of it was done with debt. I understand that, low interest debt, but debt is debt. So like, I don't want to get into it too much. It's a complex topic. My point is not to say, hey, they're heroes, but I do think that what Edu and Arteta wanted to do could only be done with an ownership group that was willing to do some things that I think economically weren't necessarily in something that they just automatically be expected to say yes to.
And an ownership that finally got close enough to the football, the club, the people, Edu, Arteta, to be able to hear what they have to say and then
remember
trust
we
them.
cared to you? I mean, we've come a long way since we cared to you. So, all right. Look, I care about you, listener, which is why this podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. It is about caring about yourself. The holidays are rolling around. Here in America, it's Thanksgiving week. We have a lot of holidays coming up, and the holidays can be a time where there's a lot of love and togetherness. There can also be a time of alienation and isolation and pain, especially through loss or whatever the case may be. The fact of the matter is that therapy is something everyone should do, and they should reach out for that help before it's a crisis. And it should just be about managing your life. There's no user manual for how to do life, right? You got to just figure it out. Well, a therapist is there to help you figure it out. I did it. It worked for me. I know it will work for you if you give it a chance. And BetterHelp has a number of advantages. They're the world's largest therapy service. They have matched 3 million people with professionally licensed and vetted therapists, available 100% online, and it's affordable. You just fill out a brief questionnaire to match with a therapist. If things aren't clicking, you can easily switch to a new therapist anytime. Couldn't be simpler. No waiting rooms, no traffic, no endless searching for the right therapist. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/vision. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/vision. And oh my, I had such a good Manscaped experience this week. I had to go on a quick trip for the weekend and I was rushing. I didn't have a lot of time. I hopped in the shower. That Lawnmower 4.0, man, it will do the job so quick. I got so clean, so well shaved, so quickly. You'd be so proud of me. Did my chest too. It's not really designed for that, but I did it. And you might be saying, well, do you want to put that on your shirt? You know what? You don't judge my grooming habits. I won't judge yours. The important thing is that you use the Lawnmower 4.0. And we're coming around to the holidays. What's going to be in Santa's sack? Well, let's talk more about taking care of Santa's sack. I don't know. It's all written right here. You know it's written right here. It's not me. Don't blame me. The point is, you can take care of all the sacks with the Lawnmower 4.0, preferably your own, but you take care of others if you want to. It is a season of giving. The Platinum Package has each product from the best-selling Performance Package, plus ultra premium body wash, ultra premium 2-in-1 shampoo and conditioner, ultra premium deodorant. So it's the Platinum Package 4.0. So all the stuff you're used to, the weed whacker, the ear and nose hair thing, the Lawnmower 4.0 with the light and the waterproof and the wireless charging and all that. You get the toner, you get the ultra premium body wash, shampoo, deodorant. It's all in there, plus the Shed travel bag, plus the boxer briefs. Do it now. Get 20% off and free shipping from the Platinum package. I mean, we're really stepping up here. Right now, manscaped.com, promo code ArsenalVision. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use code ArsenalVision. Manscaped, get your jingle balls ready for the holiday. Clive, is that enough of that?
Yes, please. That's enough of that.
Nailed it. Okay. We got there in the end, folks. Let's do a little transfer speculation because fun, right? We like fun. And Clive, I'll start with you. Let's start with this real quick. Let's say you're Mikel Arteta and you're sitting in Edu's office and Stan and Josh are there and they say, all right, we want you to win the title. What do we need to go and do for you in January within reason? You're Arteta. What do you ask for? What are you asking for in January to go at least push City the whole way? And I should say City should push us because we're I don't know if you know this, we're top of the table.
Yeah, exactly. I think recognition of the opportunity is key. And I think there's opportunity for Arsenal Football Club this year to do something. Number one priority is the Champions League. Got to get it, no matter what. But we can't risk that. We're talking about, Bukayo Saka scoring 2 goals at the World Cup. Thursday night music's not going to work for him much longer, right? We got to fix that. There are players that are growing in stature by the week. The Thursday nights are just not going to work. We have to fix it. And so that's number one priority. So it's almost de-risking that. And in the summer, you could all argue I was a guy that wanted a wide forward and then many wanted another midfielder. I felt we could get away the midfielder, and then lo and behold, on transfer deadline week, we lose a couple, and we nearly panicked into a move with Douglas Luiz. So that didn't happen. And actually, in hindsight, even though when it was going on, I wasn't totally against it, but in hindsight, I think it's been a good thing that we missed out there, and we got through it. And Partey's made quite fit, and we've got through it with Sambi covering those positions as best he can. So there's 2 positions, right? Everyone's going to expect me to say the 2 positions. It's a wide forward and a centre midfielder. We're all thinking the same. I'm not unique to that. It's just a matter of who it is, what's the level, what's the experience and the age, and whoever it is will drive a level of expectations. And if you want to ask me about one of the worries I have is, and I'm having this worry a lot less, to be fair, is Arsenal dealing with expectations. Now, at the moment, we're the youngest or second youngest squad in the Premier League, and we are just flying. So everything is positive curve, and we are exceeding our own internal expectations. But when expectations from the outside become, you need to be doing this now because you've now done this in the transfer market, you've done this, that's a different level of expectations. That's something that could weigh on you. And so I'm interested to see how they view the next steps. Is it a Jesus Zinchenko level player? I'm talking Asian experience. Or is it another couple of 22-year-olds that we can develop under our experience core that we have right now? My gut, maybe due to the fact I've been brainwashed as somebody that's watched Arsenal with a young team for the last couple of years, and I want to see that continue. My gut says it's the 22-year-olds that are going to come in. But now, we spoke last week, Elliot, 22-year-olds are not cheap anymore. Look at Darwin Núñez, right? They cost a lot of money. So
it depends on the 22-year-old, right? Yeah.
You make your choice. And I do think Arsenal seeking contractual opportunities. That's the best way. Gabriel Jesus was the last year of his contract, and I felt 45 was a bit expensive at the time for 1 year to go on the contract, because historically, that is a bit expensive. It looks real cheap now due to his influence. I think it's for Arsenal, they've got to seek those contractual opportunities if they are going to go experience, or they should continue the project with the 22-year-olds. And there's a number of players which we will scout in this couple of weeks for those 2 positions.
Yeah. We're almost a perfect club for a 22-year-old, right?
We are.
I mean, where else would you go?
So I'll turn this over to you in a second here. All I want to say, Paul, is that I don't want to be too redundant with stuff I've said in the past, but you don't know when your window is, but the window could be now. We're top of the table, right? We're playing great. We're a really good team. You don't want to crater the project, but the point of the project is to win the Premier League someday. If that day is now and not 3 years from now, that does slightly change for me whether the goal is to go out and buy a project 21-year-old who could be great in 3 seasons. I'm not saying tear up the blueprint, and I'm not saying buy a mediocre 25-year-old. But like, I do think we get this wrong. The goal of a project is not to be perpetually building. The goal of a project is to build a team that can win the Premier League. Well, if we have a team that's very close to being able to win the Premier League, you don't go sign an 18-year-old for. You can always sign an 18-year-old for $3 million. It doesn't hurt you. Doesn't hold anything back. But I guess what I'm saying, Paul, is if we're going to really make an effort to add something in January, I think it is more incumbent now than it might have been otherwise for that addition to be impactful now, not he's going to be a big difference maker in two seasons. Because if you want he's going to be a big difference maker in 2 seasons guy, you can always sign him in the summer. If you're going to do something in January now, I think it has to be a player that makes a difference this season.
Yeah.
That you just cannot throw away an open window. You don't throw away open windows, but you get the idea. You can't throw away the possibility that this is the season, not 3 seasons from now, you know?
Yeah. Look, I'm watching Clive in the window. He's just dying.
Shaking his head. Just
that movie, what's it called? 127 Hours, the one where the guy has to chew his own arm off.
His own arm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's Clive here, but screw it. I'm going to talk. Look, I think you got to stick with the plan. You got to build your trajectory, right? You got to get better all the time. So while I hear you, there's a window here we could win the Premier League, even if it's 20%, 25%, whatever. You can't throw away the plan. What you could do is buy a better 22-year-old, one who's actually bloody ready. We've seen the Cronkies in the past.
Sure.
Big money on players. So I think you stay with your program. You just might go a little heavier. Instead of getting the good 22-year-old who you think will probably work out, you get the great 22-year-old who will definitely work out, and you spend an absolutely shitload of money on it because it's there for you. So there's a spectrum, but I don't think a good test case is last season, and we could have got Champions League, but do you really feel we're missing it right now? Would you take the risk of capsizing the boat by getting the wrong player, that, still missing out on Champions League, having the wrong striker? Or do you say, this feel like nobody is happier than Arsenal? Hang on.
Yeah,
Nobody's happier than Arsenal football supporters and where we're at and how we're building, because we're on our trajectory. And there's lots of counterfactuals, blah, blah, blah. But you stick to the plan, maybe you go a little heavier, would be my feeling on it.
Sure, so absolutely. And there's just one thing that I think is a little bit of a straw man. I don't think you mean it this way, but of course, don't buy the wrong player. You know what I mean? Buying a bad player who's overpriced and doesn't fit is right. Don't do that.
Yeah.
I guess the reason I call it a straw man is if you set it as either we can buy a really talented, exciting 21-year-old for the future, or we can buy a deeply mediocre 26-year-old who's overpriced. Well, yes, of course, if those are the options, buy the younger one. But I'm saying,
so didn't you kind of set up the question that way? To be honest,
no. What I'm saying is, if our plan is a slow and steady build, right, we're going to keep buying young players who can develop into something longer term for us. I guess what I'm saying is, if there's a ready-made player that we think is good enough right now, that's maybe one for the next. So let's put it this way. Let's say you know what I want from life? I want family. I want love. I want to have kids. I want to get married. I want to get married at 35. If you meet the love of your life at 32 and she's everything or he's everything you've ever wanted in life, you're not going to be like, nah, you got to go. I told myself 35 for marriage. Sorry, sweetheart. Sorry, buddy. Because you'd be crazy. You'd be throwing away the thing that you always hope to have. If the goal of building a squad is to eventually compete for the title, and we're doing it right now, then we have to maximize right now. Clive, and this is why it's a false dichotomy, you don't have to buy a player that screws your future. That's not my point. My point is, can you find a player who is more likely to have an impact now than a project player, right? Like a Danilo, a great example. Danilo, let's make this more concrete. Clive, Danilo could be a player that we should buy. And he could be a player that will be good for us. The likelihood that Danilo comes in and substantially changes our fortunes this season, I think, is relatively low. Okay? Does that mean we shouldn't go get Danilo at some point? Maybe, maybe not. Your mileage may vary. Does it mean we should go get a different player in January who can have an impact this season? That's more what I'm asking about, you know?
Yeah, so the reason I had my hand up earlier, because you said the goal of the project's got to be to win the league. And I would say, I would question that, because you sort of turned that slightly towards the end of your conversation. The goal of this project is to consistently compete at the top end of the table. Consistently compete at the top end.
Agreed.
Not for 1 year and then blow up, but every single year you layer on, and you change the position and the perception of your club over half a decade by being right there. Like Liverpool have done up until this season. They have changed the perception of their club from a team that barely qualified for Champions League to being into 2 or 3 Champions League finals in the last half decade. Right? So that's what we need to be doing. And to do that, you have to build something. And you have to build it properly, strategically, and carefully by having the right profile of players, the right mix of players, the right balance of players, the right character of players. That makes a dressing room and makes Arsenal. Remember when I first started this podcast? One of my favourite phrases: makes Arsenal the employer of choice.
Employer
of choice. The
choice
place to be. The place to be. It has to be the place to be. And there are conversations about players out there right now that we are slowly thinking, I wonder if they'll come to Arsenal. And because of what? Because of the things that have been put in place on and off the pitch, because of the players that are on the pitch and how connected we feel to them and how the fans feel about the club right now. If you're somebody looking in the window, you're thinking, that's the restaurant I want to walk into. I want to taste their steak, mate. It looks good in there. There's a queue to get in and I want to go there because it looks like a nice place.
We've gone so big on analogies on this episode. Paul's just drooling. He loves this. This is his favorite episode ever.
That's the
I'm
place.
talking marriage. You're talking steak. We know where our heads are at.
No one wants to go to a restaurant where
about Santa taking care of Santa's sack.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No one wants to go to a restaurant where you can just book and you're there on a Saturday night. You book on Saturday morning. You want to make it somewhere that's hard, exclusive, that's special. The one you got to wait 4 weeks for to get in. That's the one you want to be going to, right? And you want to make it a place that's really exciting. And that's where we are. And so eventually we won't be worrying about Saka leaving, because why would he leave? Right? And I think it's very important. The whole feeling around this club is built on strategic thinking. Hence why I hope we don't lurch. I really hope we don't lurch. But the problem is everybody in the European market knows the Premier League has the money. And so a developmental player like, Cody Gakpo, when we started looking at him in August, he was a developmental player. He just scored a goal in the World Cup. In August, he wasn't even in the Dutch team. He's now in the Dutch team, scored a goal in the opening match of the World Cup. That £25 million player is not £25 million anymore. It's 35, 45, 55, and we don't know if he can translate to the Premier League. It makes it very challenging to have that mindset that we can spend 30, 40 million to get someone to come in and really make an impact, when that's the sort of player that we could be looking at and the price is just running away as we speak, So I think it's a challenge, Elliot, but I take strategy, I take building blocks, I take more. Fabio Vieira is a good example of a player that we need to be going for. I think in the second half of the season, we'll see a lot more of. I'm not against another one like that, if not a little bit maybe more physically ready right now. I'd be happy with that in the forward area. And in centre midfield, I think the key thing really, Elliot, is tackling. The ability to create transitions by taking the ball away. I think we have enough good ball players. What Thomas Partey does that no one else does, he can jump on people, take it off them and start attacks. And I think when he's missing, we don't have that gene. We become a passing team that doesn't go and get into people and create trauma. And so I've been looking at somebody that can jump out of his hole and really get people, create the transitions for our sprinty wide men. So that's where I am with it. And when we go to our Friday scouting session, when I'll be bringing players to you, that's what I'm thinking about. So yeah, that's where I am.
Yeah. And just to be clear, right? Like you referenced Liverpool. Liverpool had a process, but at some point the process resulted in them not buying the 24-year-old 30 million. At some point it was, we're going to go get Virgil van Dijk because he's the final piece, right? There's, if you're always building for the future, like, a process has to have stages. And when you sit down, these 5-year plans, these 3-year plans, whatever they are, part of it has to be like, all right, in a couple of seasons, this is where we see ourselves. Then in a few seasons beyond that, we kind of see ourselves here. There have to be stages. And I think we did some of that this summer. Obviously, Gabriel Jesus, right, hitting his prime, center forward, the crown jewel for us. I get it. It's the point that if you never adjust your approach based on your current position, then that's kind of a mistake, right? I think I'm not saying tear up the roadmap and just go a different direction. I'm just saying maybe we're a little further along the road than we expected to be is another analogy. What is happening to this podcast? Welcome to the ArsenalVision Analogy Podcast. My name is Elliot Smith. Okay, look, I think we should leave it there. The point is, January is an opportunity. How we approach that opportunity will be fascinating. It will be really fascinating, right? Because by the way, you can go back and listen to the podcast. I pretty much supported our decision not to go big last January and screw everything up just to chase top 4. I said, if they didn't find a guy they really liked and believed was on the process of where we're going, and you know what? Had we gotten Bruno Guimaraes, I think we're probably in the Champions League. We didn't. I don't know if we ever could have gotten him. There's a lot of shenanigans, I think, that were involved there. But I was supportive of that. If we do nothing this January or do something that's very project-y, it's not that I'm going to lose my mind. It's that I will be curious what I wish I could just be a fly on the wall to understand the thought process behind it, because we are in a very unique position. Having said that, we're going to go into January having played fewer games than you usually would in a January window, which makes it harder to assess what your actual options are. So we'll keep everything on the table. I think January will be a fascinating way of evaluating, are they making a move they always were going to make? Or is this a move that reflects a belief in what this season could bring? And have they pivoted? That'll be fun to watch. Let's leave it there. There'll be a World Cup Daily coming up. It's just podcasts all the time. Join us for the scouting video later this week, or join us for the scouting video we did of Mudryk and Lidstrom. I think you'd be interested by it. So that's enough of that. Paul is on Twitter in the same way that, how when you're driving a car and you put it in second gear. No, I'm not going to do it more analogies. Paul's on Twitter. Pause my pants. Thanks, Pause.
Woohoo!
Clive's on Twitter. Clive PFC. Thanks, Clive.
Thank you very much.
My name's Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter. You ain't gonna. We love you, and we will talk to you after your country 10, other country 0.